Thank you for watching. Subscribe on Deceived Husbands for more stories. Sometimes you never really know how you'll react until it happens. I've read where everyone seems to have the answers, but they're always on opposite sides. I grew up in a broken home. Mom and Dad argued all the time, and one day Dad walked out on us. I was 12 at the time and didn't understand it all. I had an older brother and sister, but they were now out of the house. He was 24 and she was 22, and they were both in college at the time. They're both now married and live in other states. I might only see them during a holiday or if they visit while on vacation. They're not very close to Mom since she got remarried. As best as I can understand it, I was what you call a love child. I was born when my parents were hoping to save their marriage. It went all right for a while, but the bickering and arguing started all over again. I think the straw that broke the camel's back was Dad finding out Mom had cheated on him. She said it was because he cheated on her first years ago. This crap went on until Mom blurted out one time that I might not even be Dad's son. I know it was all said in the heat of the argument, but Dad ended up having a DNA test done. He and Mom were both shocked when it came back that Dad was not my biological father. Dad started divorce proceedings the next day at 8 a.m. He was the only dad I ever knew. He worked all the time and we weren't all that close, but now there was no one. After the divorce, I talked to him once in a while, but it wasn't the same anymore. When I asked Mom who my father was, she said she wasn't sure. She always thought it was Dad. Life was hard for me after that. As I grew up, I later learned that Mom was somewhat of a party woman. She married young and had my brother and sister both before she was 21. She started going out with some of the women she worked with. Dad traveled a lot since he was a truck driver, so I know they both constantly cheated on one another. After the divorce, Mom didn't remarry until I was 21, but she did bring a number of men to the house. Usually, it was when I was gone to my friends or at my grandparents' home. They never spent the night when I was home. That leads to when I got married. I was 25 at the time and met Megan. She was a secretary at the hardware store where I worked. I asked her out and we became friends and then lovers very quickly. We were married within the year. She was always the flirty type, but I always thought it was just part of her personality. She seemed to be friends with everyone. She was 23 when I met her and said she was a virgin. To be honest, I never knew for sure then, but now I know the real story. Our life was what I would have called normal. We went to the movies, visited friends and relatives, ate out about half the time. Sometimes Megan would cook meals for us at home. It was usually macaroni and cheese or something else that was easy to make. Lots of heat and serve dinners. I didn't mind. We both worked, and I knew she wasn't much of a cook when we dated. When we went out with friends, I always wondered about Megan having sex with other men. I know it was because of the way my mother was. I didn't want to think that way, but it was lodged into my mind. I never told Megan about my mother other than she dated. The last thing I would have told my wife was that I was a peeping Tom and watched my mother have sex with a number of men. Our sex life I would have considered normal. The reason we got married was because she got pregnant. When she told me, I asked her to marry me. I felt it was the right thing to do. I liked her a lot and figured I could grow to love her. Her family hated me from the start. I guess it began because they blamed me for not using protection and getting her pregnant. In their eyes, Megan could do no wrong. I was fighting an uphill battle from the start. The only one in her family that liked me was her sister, Laura. She was 2 years younger than Megan, and she was a lot more quiet and kept to herself where Megan was outgoing. I guess I always had a thing for Laura because she was the only one in the family that talked to me. In her 5th month of pregnancy, Megan lost the baby. That was 3 years ago. We've been married for almost 4 years now. I've asked her if she has ever been with another man, and she always tells me she hasn't. During our lovemaking, I've asked her if she ever thought about it, and she told me she doesn't need another man. I was more than enough for her. I was young and stupid and really didn't know much about life. When I graduated, my mom's new husband told me it was time for me to be out on my own. I found a cheap apartment, found a job at the hardware store, and had a pretty good life going. I dated a few girls because, like most young men, I was a horny guy. Megan went to a junior college in our town and after graduating started working as a secretary at our hardware store. Needless to say, a young, good-looking woman was always a nice sight. We dated and by the third date began having sex. She was born and raised in Lakeview, Ohio, which was about 50 miles away. She would go home some weekends to see her family. When they met me, they really didn't care for me. I later found out that Megan used to date a guy named Jack, whom her parents loved. I guess he was a football star when they were in high school. Megan broke up with him when she was going away to college. He got a job in the steel mill where his dad worked. I guess they made pretty good money, and since Jack's dad was in management, he could be on a fast track to a promotion. I later learned from Laura that Jack got pissed and quickly married one of Megan's friends, Sheila. They now have 2 kids of their own. Sheila and Megan don't get along anymore. That's why Megan stayed in our town after her graduation. She roomed with an aunt till we got married. I don't know her aunt all that well. We got married at the courthouse. Her parents didn't even attend. Her sister Laura did show up as well as her aunt. Since the loss of the baby, Megan and her parents have made up. I rarely visited them but enjoyed when Laura comes to see us. I guess I shouldn't feel this way, but I do. Megan had made a lot of friends in our town. Some are people we work with and others are our neighbors. I know she has gone out with her friends, but they are all married, and to the best of my knowledge, she hasn't been unfaithful. She has told me that she has danced with other men if the girls went to a lounge, but that was all she ever did. A few times she had come home pretty horny and the sex was great, especially if she had too much to drink. I honestly believed she was faithful to me. That was until we went out of town to her cousin's wedding. It was only 50 miles away in Lakeview, the city where she grew up and graduated from high school. She introduced me to so many people that it was almost like a high school reunion as well as a wedding. We both drank quite a bit, seeing we were staying in the motel where the reception was being held. I told her I wouldn't stay at her parents' house. They hardly even talked to me at the wedding. The trouble started when a lot of her old friends wanted to dance with her. I couldn't say much since her female cousins and friends asked me to dance as well. I held them close but didn't get inappropriate with any of them. I couldn't say the same about Megan. She was outright flirting, which she does when she drinks. Her cousin said she was always like that but was harmless. I did enjoy dancing with Laura. She was just one of those people I enjoy being around. I made sure I didn't do anything inappropriate with her but did like holding her in my arms. I did tell her I didn't approve of the way Megan was acting. She didn't say anything about it, but I don't think she cared for the way Megan was acting either. I told Megan when I danced to slow dance with her that I didn't approve of what she was doing, and she just called me an old party pooper and said she would dance with who she wanted and the way she wanted. After that, I wasn't doing much dancing, but a lot of drinking and watching Megan being groped over and over again. She would rub her body against a guy and then looked at me and laughed. I never laughed back. There were basically 3 guys that she was dancing the most with inappropriately. 2 were old high school friends and the other was just a friend of theirs. I've never seen her quite this wild before. I went up to her again and told her to cut this out or we would be leaving. She told me she was having fun and if I wanted to leave then just leave. She wasn't going anywhere. I went over by the back wall, kind of out of the way, and watched her. I was getting more and more pissed. It was getting late and some of the partygoers were starting to leave. I figured it was finally over, and I figured it was finally over and I could get over it. I went to the restroom and took a needed piss. When I came back out, Megan was gone. I looked all over for her and even asked a couple of her cousins if they had seen her. I saw 2 of the guys that were with her earlier. One was her old schoolmate. They said Jack took her up to her room. She was drunk and quite out of it. They laughed, but I didn't think it was funny as I headed up to our room. When I walked in, she wasn't there. I was worried that he had taken her to his room instead. I had no idea which one it might have been. Our room was on the 2nd floor. I went down to the front desk and asked what room her friends were in. I found out they were on the 1st floor facing the pool, so they had 2 door entrances. I walked down the hall and saw the 2 guys I had talked to getting ready to enter the room. They must have all been rooming together. They looked back at me and laughed as they entered the room. I went down the hall and heard a woman's voice. I knew it was Megan. I banged on the door and one of the guys opened it. I could immediately see Megan on her knees, lying across the bed with her back in the air. This Jack guy had his meat buried in her. "What the hell?" I yelled. Megan was so into being drilled, I don't think she even heard me. This guy, Tony, told me that she came in willingly and I could either watch or leave. He reminded me that there were 3 of them and only 1 of me, and if I caused any trouble, I would be getting my bum kicked. Tony also had a knife. He was right, one and none, I could hold my own with any one of them, but 3 together, I didn't stand a chance. I heard Megan ask Jack, who came into the room. He told her it was Tony and Ben. "My God, Jack, they can see me naked," she said. He laughed and said they were going to do more than just see her. "Ben has wanted you for years, and I told him and Tony that they could have a go at you. After all, you've been rubbing your body and teasing them all night." Megan didn't say anything as Ben helped Jack take off the rest of her clothes and turned her over. Tony stood next to me to make sure I didn't cause any trouble. He held a knife to my throat. I stayed there and sat on a chair out of the way as one after the other they screwed her, and she was begging them for more. I honestly don't know why I didn't at least try to put a stop to this, knife or no knife. I guess it was because Megan was asking to be drilled, and after what I saw, she was not worth fighting for anymore. When Tony realized I wasn't going to put up a fight, he joined the others. I sat there like the chump I was. Tony had just finished screwing her. "Damn, she's one good one," said Tony. I didn't mention it before, but Tony was a light-skinned man. I would guess he was of mixed race. Megan sat up, and that's when she saw me for the first time. "Oh my God, Bob, what are you doing here?" she yelled out, watching a lying 304 of a wife getting drilled. "Don't go telling me you were being forced. I heard you asking for more," I yelled at her. "I'm sorry, Bob, I had too much to drink. Tony, Ben, please let me up. This was a big mistake. I need to go talk with my husband." She must have sobered up a little. Watching my wife drilling other men made me want to puke. "No way you're going anywhere, sweetie, till we're through with you," replied Ben. "No, look, you have to let me go. My marriage depends on it," said Megan. "Your marriage is over," I said to Megan. They looked back at me and laughed and called me a weak cuck. I shook my head and walked out the door. They were right. I went up to my room and packed my things. I knew my marriage to Megan was over. My problem now was I was made a cuck, and these a-holes made me one. I knew deep down that I had to get even with them at any cost. I couldn't go through life letting these a-holes do this to me. I knew one at a time I could take them. I just had to bide my time and do my best not to get caught. I packed my luggage, and even though I had drunk a lot, I headed for home. I figured when they got through with Megan, she would go up to our room and sleep it off. She had enough friends and relatives that lived nearby that she would find a way home. At 10 a.m. the next morning, the phone rang. It was Megan. "Bob, how could you just leave me there? I can't believe any man would leave his wife like that. How am I supposed to get home? Ask one of your boyfriends, offer them a BJ or some sex for a ride home. Oh, they already got that, didn't they? Bob, I'm sorry. It was a mistake. I drank too much. I didn't mean for that to happen. They took advantage of me. When you left the party, they were going to walk me to my room but took me to theirs instead. First, I didn't leave the party. I went to the restroom, and when I returned, you had left with your old boyfriend. It took me a while to find out where you were. As far as the taking advantage of you, I'll come and get you if you file sexual assault charges against them. Have them arrested. Otherwise, I'll have to say you were totally willing and our marriage is over. I knew our marriage was over anyway, but I wanted to see what Megan would say. I can't file charges against them. Everyone will know what happened. Yeah, right. You were totally willing and now have remorse. By the way, I'm filing for divorce tomorrow on the grounds of adultery. Everybody will know anyway. You can have the apartment. Me and a couple of my friends are moving out my stuff. Have a good life." I hung up. She did get home that evening. Her sister Laura drove her home. I got a storage locker for most of my stuff and got a room that rents by the week. I didn't need much. I went into the hardware store on Monday and quit my job. Megan didn't show up for work that day. I'm not sure why, but it made it a lot easier for me. I told my boss I was moving out of state and gave him a local post office box number to send my final checks and my savings plan that I cashed in. I had my pickup truck that was paid for and went to the bank and took half of the money out of our savings account. I had our checkbook and paid off the balance of our credit card, at least the one that had my name on it. I was pretty much out of any debt that I helped incur. I left the checkbook at the bank and told them to give it to Megan when she came in. For the next few days, I tried to formulate some kind of plan. After receiving my money, I had $2,500 from my part of our savings and checking. I would be getting $18,000 in a week from my job savings and another $2,500 from my last paycheck and vacation pay. I did contact a lawyer and filed for a divorce. He told me I needed names and proof if I were going to use adultery for divorce. My other option was a dissolution, but I wanted everyone to know the witch that Megan was. The lawyer went ahead and sent Megan the papers. He mentioned to her that I didn't want to speak to her and if she had any questions to contact him. I did buy a cell phone and gave my mom the number as well as the lawyer. I knew that there was a hardware store in West Virginia, just across the Ohio border. I had met the owner a few times when he came to a few hardware company meetings. He told me if I ever wanted a job to look him up. I never thought I would be taking him up on it. I had a meeting with him and said I needed a job and explained that I was getting a divorce and that my wife worked for my old company. He promised not to tell my ex-employer that I was working for him and I could start the following Monday. I found myself a trailer for sale pretty cheap. It was set up in a trailer park. I picked up my stuff out of storage and moved in. Luckily, it had a lot of furniture in it, so I didn't have to go buy a lot of things. I stopped by a diner outside of Lakeview and couldn't believe my waitress was Laura, my soon-to-be ex-sister-in-law. She looked mad when she saw me. "Why did you leave Megan?" "She said you were mad because she danced with her old boyfriends and left her at the wedding. Then, when she went to your room, you had left her stranded with no way to get home. I took her home the next morning and you had moved out. How could you do such a thing? I never thought you were like that. Most of what you said isn't true." I don't have time to explain the whole story. If you want to know the truth, give me a call and we can meet and I'll tell you the truth. Your sister is a lying, cheating 304. I know Laura was surprised when I called her sister a cheating 304. I never talked that way around Laura. I gave her my phone number and asked one favor of her, and that was to not give that phone number to Megan. For some reason, I felt I could trust Laura. I ate breakfast and headed over to my new job. The only people that knew where I was working were Laura and my lawyer. It was funny that I was only 20 miles from Megan's hometown of Lakeview. I was surprised that I did get a call from Laura the following day. She worked mornings at the diner and went to college in the afternoon. She was taking courses in nursing and was just about finished. She had about 6 months to go. She agreed to meet me for dinner at a restaurant in West Virginia after she got out of classes. She told me she wanted the truth and didn't feel she was getting it from Megan. Needless to say, Megan had everyone else convinced it was my jealousy that broke up our marriage. My job at the hardware store was hard work, but kept me physically fit. I got all the exercise I needed. Some days I went out and had a few beers with some of my fellow workers. I would usually get something to eat and then to bed to get some rest. I kept in touch with my lawyer, and he told me he needed the names and addresses of the men who had sex with Megan. All I knew were their first names Ben, Tony, and Jack. I hoped that Laura might help me out. When we met for dinner, she wasn't in the best mood. She heard from Megan that I was trying to divorce her on the grounds of adultery, and Megan said they were unfounded. We ordered dinner, and I told Laura that I would be totally honest with her. I had no reason to lie. As we were eating, I told her about the way that Megan acted at the wedding. She did say she thought that Megan was overdoing the flirting, and Megan admitted to it. Then I told her the rest of the story. I mentioned that I went to the restroom, and when I came out, Megan was gone, and so was her friend Jack. I let her know that I talked to Tony and Ben, and they said that Jack took Megan up to our room. But when I got there, she wasn't there. I went into detail about finding her in Jack's room with his friends, how she was having sex with them, and didn't even know I was there. How could you just sit there and watch them having sex with Megan? I can't believe you just sat there and did nothing. I guess I just froze when I first saw her. Then she was begging them to continue. Tony had a knife and he did tell me it was 3 against 1. I would have probably fought them anyway if Megan was being assaulted. But the sex with these 3 a-holes was consensual. When Megan turned around and saw me, she asked them to stop. She told me she made a mistake. I called her a 304 wife and that I would be getting a divorce. I went back to our room, got my things, and went home. I was gone when you dropped her off at home the next day. I swear to God it's the absolute truth. I would never lie to you. I care for you too much. I even mentioned to Megan that if she filed assault charges against them, I would come pick her up at the motel. She told me she couldn't do that. Laura stared at me for what seemed like the longest time. I believed that she could see the truth in my eyes. That's when I asked her for a favor. Laura, I need the last names and addresses of Jack, Tony, and Ben. Would you be able to get them for me? She looked at me and then away for a few seconds. What do you want with them? She asked. I need them in my divorce statement. I'm getting the divorce on grounds of adultery. My lawyer told me that I need that information. Can you get it for me? Do you know what you're asking? Megan is my sister and you want me to betray her and side with you. No, that's not true. All I'm asking for is the full names and addresses of the men who had sex with my wife. You can't betray her if she didn't do anything wrong, can you? I know you well enough that you know I'm telling the truth, Laura. I can still find out the information if you don't want to help me. It would just be faster since I know you already know their names. I guess more than anything, I want us to stay friends. Okay, I'll get you what you want. I have to tell you that I don't know if I totally believe you. Stop in Thursday. That's when I work again and I'll have it for you. Thursday before work, I stopped in the restaurant and asked to be seated in Laura's section. I thought I saw her smile when she looked my way. When she came to my table, she slipped me a folded piece of paper and I put it in my pocket. I thanked her and ordered breakfast. I saw my lawyer after work and gave him a copy of the information I picked up. He told me that Megan had called him and said she wasn't going to sign the papers if it said divorce because of adultery. However, if we had a dissolution due to irreconcilable differences, she would agree to that. It had something to do with ruining her reputation. My lawyer told me that was my best option. The problem was that there was no proof to the allegation I was charging her with in the divorce. I didn't have any other witnesses, and the 3 men surely wouldn't admit to having sex with Megan. No video, no pictures, nothing to prove it happened. It was just my word against hers. I went along with the lawyer and applied for a dissolution. He said it would be finalized in about 4 months. I then got more bad news. Since I was on the lease and it would have to be renewed again in 2 months, I would have to pay half the rent for the next 2 months. Then I could be removed from the rental agreement. After that, at least I would rid myself of the lying 304. The only problem was my need for some type of revenge. I was made a cuck and sat there and took it. Looking back, I should have just walked out instead of watching Megan and then listening to her telling them how good it felt. Now I also remember Jack asking her if it was as good as it used to be. I remembered feeling sad when she said yes. Now Megan gets away with being the one that people believed. I'm just considered a jealous husband. My lawyer and Laura are the only 2 I told the whole truth to. I figured it would all come out in the divorce, but now it was just a dissolution. I did tell my friends and the guys that I work with that my wife cheated on me, but didn't give any details. It was bad enough that I was a cuck, let alone that I stayed and watched it happen. In the following months, I worked and would stop and see Laura at the restaurant every chance I got. She gave me her work schedule, and I ate there if she was working. It was an extra 15 miles to drive, but I didn't care. I asked her out, and she told me she would love to go out with me, but not until after the divorce. No one in her family knew that we were seeing each other, even though it was only at her work. One day she looked sad when I came in. When I asked her what was wrong, she told me that Megan was dating Jack again. It's only been 2 months since the 2 of you separated and she's already back with him. I thought Jack was married. He is. I went to see her one day and he was at your old apartment. When she came to the door, I could see what they had been doing. All she had on was a robe and her hair was a mess. He was buttoning his shirt coming out of the bedroom. I didn't even go in after seeing them. I called her a 304 and told her that she didn't deserve you. All she said was, "Don't tell Mom and Dad." I left knowing that everything you told me was probably true. I'm sorry for doubting you. It had now been over 4 months since I applied for the divorce. I got a call from Laura telling me she needed to see me. We met after she got out of class one evening. I was just happy to see her. We met in a lounge outside of the city. We sat in a booth and ordered a drink. "Okay, what's up?" I asked. "You seem very nervous on the phone. Megan's pregnant." "I heard her tell Mom last night. She told Mom that you're the father." "That's a lie. We haven't been together for over 5 months. How far along is she?" "She told Mom around 4 months. It must have happened about the time you left her." "Are you sure it can't possibly be yours?" "I'm positive, but it's going to mess up my dissolution. Damn that." "I'm sorry. I know she's your sister, but I hate her for what she's done. All I can say is I married the wrong sister." "What?" asked Laura. "If Megan hadn't gotten pregnant, I would not have married her. You see, I had a crush on you, but I wanted to do what was right by Megan. Then we got married. I know that she never loved me, but I put in a real effort. Now I have to wonder if the first baby was even mine to begin with, knowing she was sleeping around." Laura didn't say anything. I think she was a bit shocked. Then she said, "Why didn't you ever say anything to me?" asked Laura. "What good would it have done? I thought it best to just hold it in. Besides, I didn't know how you felt and nothing would have changed, but everything would have been very uncomfortable for both of us. I wanted to make my marriage work, but I guess your sister had other ideas. I'm sorry, I really am. I liked you too and thought of how lucky Megan was. Bob, I have to leave now. Please don't let anyone know I told you about Megan. I just thought you should know. I'm sure she'll bring it up in a couple of weeks at your dissolution hearing. I can't see you before that except if you come into the restaurant." She got up to leave and gave me a hug. I saw tears in her eyes. She gave me a piece of paper which was her work schedule for the next month. Maybe she wanted to see me after all. I knew it must be hard on her knowing how Megan was lying to her parents, or that she hadn't told anyone that she and I had been in communication. I did stop by for breakfast whenever I knew she was there. We only had a few minutes to talk, but it was always nice seeing her. I did get a call from my lawyer about our appearance in court. He mentioned that my wife said she was pregnant and was asking for support. She was at the closing of the dissolution with her attorney. I told them we had agreed to our settlement and it was already done. I wasn't paying anything more. I did tell her attorney that the baby wasn't mine and I wasn't giving her anything. Megan had health coverage from her job, so it would cover most of the costs of the baby. I knew the baby wasn't mine, so I came up with an idea. I told her attorney I would sign an addendum to the dissolution form that if the child was mine, that I would pay half of any medical bills that would occur as well as child support till the child was 18. I would also pay for a DNA test at the baby's birth. If the child wasn't mine, she would get nothing from me. She yelled at me, but her attorney said it was a fair offer and she should take it. We signed the addendum and my marriage was over. After signing the final papers, I looked over at Megan with disdain and said, "By the way, I know you're still sleeping with your old boyfriend Jack. You might want to tell him he's going to be a daddy." She looked at me with one of those, "How do you know that?" looks. I just walked out a free man. But in my gut, I knew that really wasn't much revenge. I still needed real revenge. Now it was time to make a few plans. I often thought that maybe I should just let it all go and go on with my life, but my inner feeling wouldn't let that happen. It constantly nudged at my insides. The next time I saw Laura, I mentioned that I told Megan that I knew she was sleeping with Jack and she might want to tell him he's going to be a father. "God, Bob, you didn't tell her I told you, did you?" "No, I just blurted it out. No one except the guys at work knows I even come here to see you. I am divorced now, so can we get together?" "Bob, this is a very busy time for me. I'm working, plus I have my school and finals coming up. I'm graduating with a nursing degree in a few months. Then there is the big problem of dealing with my family. They still blame you for the divorce and getting Megan pregnant again. Maybe if I talked with them, they might understand differently someday, but this isn't the best time. I'm not avoiding you. In fact, I want to be with you, but the time has to be right. Please try and understand. Due to her work schedule and schooling, I could only see her twice a week for breakfast. I told her I could wait as long as she needed me to. I was able to get a little information on the scumbags that had sex with Megan. I decided to start getting even. I knew that the three a-holes didn't always hang out together. Once in a while, they went to a bar across from the steel mill after work. I had their home addresses thanks to Laura. She had no idea I was going to use it for revenge. I started my revenge with Tony, the guy that had sex with Megan and held a knife on me while I sat there and took it, watching my wife have sex and him laughing at me. I followed him a couple of times to a bar near where he lived. I always kept my distance and never went in. It was pretty much a mixed bar, but predominantly Hispanic. Tony would often go there on Saturday nights and once in a while during the week and stay for an hour or so. He would ride his motorcycle and park it in the back so no one would mess with it. It was late on a Wednesday night that I followed him to the bar. It was a pretty light night for bars since it was a weeknight. It was a dreary, dark night and not much was happening. I waited an hour and was parked in a lot next to the bar. It was near midnight when he came out. I looked all around and didn't see anyone. I put a mask over my face, kind of like a cold weather mask. I took my ball bat and went up behind him. He didn't hear me due to starting his cycle. I swung the bat and caught him across the small of the back. I swung 2 more times, hitting his arms, which he raised to protect his head. He did have his helmet on, but still got his bell rung. I swung 1 last time and caught him in the ribs. He never had a chance to retaliate or see who I was. He fell off his bike, which stopped running as he fell to the pavement in utter pain. He seemed to be conscious, but barely. I headed back to my truck and went home. I guess I was lucky that no one had seen me. It was a stupid thing to do, but sometimes we all do things we shouldn't. It was in the papers the next day that a man was beaten behind the bar. They had no witnesses and no suspects. There was no one that would think I was involved. Seeing it was nearly 6 months ago that he drilled my ex-wife and it was never mentioned in court. Maybe this dissolution turned out better for me. I would have liked for Tony to have known it was me, but that would have caused a whole new set of problems up the road. The next time I had stopped in for breakfast, Laura asked me if I read about Tony getting beat up. I told her I had, but I didn't know much about the area. I'm happy he got his payback. Probably was some other husband getting even with him, I said. Laura stared at me but never asked me if I was involved. The problem would have been that I wouldn't have wanted to lie to her. I did get some satisfaction from beating him. Too bad he didn't know it was me, but again that could present some long-term problems. He was in the hospital for a week with multiple bruises and fractures. He would be out of work for a month, according to the reports. He had no idea who it was because the person was wearing a mask. He didn't even know his attacker. Good thing I wore gloves. It was now time to go after Jack. He was married, so I figured the revenge might be a little easier to attain. I knew that on Saturdays he usually went to see Megan, thanks to the information I got from Laura. I figured he told his wife that he was working or out with his friends. That way he had the whole day to be with Megan. Around noon on Saturday, I went to his house. I knew his wife was named Sheila and was in the same graduating class as Jack and Megan. I knocked on the door and a nice-looking lady answered. I could see 2 small children yelling and playing in the living room. "Can I help you?" asked Sheila. "My name is Bob Harris. I'm not quite sure how to say this to you. Your husband is having sex with my ex-wife." "What? Who are you again? Who's your wife? Why are you telling me this? I'm Bob Harris. My wife is Megan Harris. She was in your high school. I know who the hell she is, the witch. How do you know Jack is screwing her? She came out on the porch and closed the door so her kids couldn't hear. We were at a wedding a few months ago and I caught them having sex. I didn't know if it was a one-time thing at the time, but after hearing she had been with him before, I divorced her. Now I find out she has been with him before we were even married and never stopped having sex with him. Now she's pregnant, and I believe Jack is the father." I know for sure that I'm not. Why should I believe you? I don't even know you, and you come to my house while my husband is at work and accuse him of screwing his old girlfriend. Sounds like you just want revenge. I do want revenge, but it is the truth. Your husband isn't at work today. He's with Megan at her apartment 50 miles away. He goes there most every week. I can prove it to you. How are you going to do that? I'll call Megan and ask to speak to Jack. Then he'll hand you the phone. Do you know of any reason why he should be there? Hell no. Wait here while I get the phone. She went inside and brought her phone out. I noticed it was a speaker phone and told her I would use it so she could hear the entire conversation. I dialed my old number and Megan answered the phone. Megan, this is Bob. What the hell do you want? Said Megan. I know your lover Jack is there and I need to say something to him. Put him on. He's not here, you lying 304. I can hear him in the background talking. Hand him the damn phone. She handed Jack the phone and I gave Sheila her phone. What the hell do you want, you pervert? Want to watch me drill your ex-wife again? He started laughing. Sheila yelled, You creep! So you're back sleeping with your 304S again. Well, I have news for you. You can just stay there. We're through. Just to get even with your cheating, I'm going to drill Bob. Two can play this game. Jack mumbled a bunch of things that didn't make much sense. He was trying to make excuses, but Sheila told him to go to hell, that he was a lying, cheating creep and she was getting a divorce. After she hung up, she told me she had no intention of having sex with me. She just said it to get even with Jack. She was a mother and had 2 children to raise. Between her job and the alimony she would get from Jack, she would do quite well. She actually thanked me for telling her the truth. If Jack should ever ask me if I had sex with her, I was welcome to say yes. But in court for the divorce, she would be telling the truth. I did tell her if she needed me as a witness in her divorce case that I would be willing to testify. I left feeling both good and bad. I got revenge on Jack, but I hurt Sheila and broke up her marriage. She did tell me she thought he had been cheating on her, but never had the evidence on who it might be with. I had to wonder why Jack would have a fling with Megan with a nice-looking woman like Sheila and 2 kids at home that cared for him. Some guys are just born a-holes, and because some were school athletes, they still think they're studs. Guys like Jack needed to grow up. Sheila did kick his bum out. He couldn't stay with Megan because it was too far away from his work. When Laura found out about it, she wasn't mad at me. If anything, she said her sister deserved it. Her parents were surprised that Jack had cheated on his wife with Megan. Jack moved in temporarily with Ben and his mother. Ben was divorced a couple of years back. His wife left him for another man. He moved back in with his mother. I did find out that his mom was divorced when Ben was a teenager. She pretty much raised him alone. I guess a lot of us were raised by a single parent. She was a bartender at a neighborhood bar. She had asked Ben not to be a customer there because it made her feel uncomfortable watching him drink the way his father did. She didn't have a problem with Jack moving in temporarily till he could find a place. In case you're wondering, I got most of my information with small talks with Laura when I stopped in for breakfast. Megan was getting bigger and would be having her baby in another month or so. According to Laura, Jack wasn't the kind of guy that could take care of himself. He needed a woman to take care of him. Laura said that Megan came to visit her parents one weekend and brought Jack along. According to Laura, Jack used his razzle-dazzle to explain that he and Sheila had been on the outs for quite some time. When he saw Megan at the wedding, he remembered how much he cared for her. He began seeing her after I filed for divorce. Damn, he could lie. They became close friends again, and now he asked her to marry him. He knew she was going through a lot, and they would wait till after the baby was born and his divorce was final. They figured they would find a place near Lakeview to live, so Megan and the baby would be near her parents. He got a promotion at the mill so Megan wouldn't have to work if she didn't want to. He did say he would be a good father to the baby, even though it was mine. Megan's parents accepted him lock, stock, and barrel. Laura said she couldn't believe all the crap the 2 of them put out. She did her best not to say anything and would just bide her time till school was out. If you haven't figured it out by now, Megan was always their favorite. In their eyes, she could do no wrong. Needless to say, Laura and Megan were pretty much opposites. I wanted to be with Laura, but she was so busy with working at the diner, taking her nursing classes, and also helping out at the hospital as a nurse's aide. Maybe her time would come. She always told me that. I went into the bar with 4 of my friends after work. I couldn't believe it when I saw Jack and Ben sitting there. I didn't know whether to avoid them or confront them. I didn't have much choice when Jack said, "Hey Bob, I'm screwing your old lady again. You screwed up my marriage, but I still have your ex to drill." They started laughing. "So you're screwing a pregnant 304 who was willing to give out to your friends. Aren't you the lucky one? What do you say you and I step outside and settle this little shouting match? Or are you afraid of going one on none? Right, there are only 2 of us and 4 of you." "Evenly matched," he laughed. "The minute I beat you up, they'll all jump in. You mean the way you had it 3-1 at the wedding? She asked for it, and you know it. By the way, you stay the hell away from Sheila and my kids if you know what's good for you. I don't need a ready-made family. I'll let you support them. I have to say that Sheila is one nice woman, not like the 304 I was married to. Looks to me that you hooked your horse up to the wrong wagon." My friends and I went over and got a booth and had a few beers. I could see Jack and Ben talking and would like to jump on me, but I was with 3 other guys. I would gladly take on either one as long as it was one or none. I went up and got us some more beers, and I heard Ben call me a cuck on the way back. I looked at him and said, "You're next on my list." I know they had to wonder if it was me that beat up Tony months ago, but there was absolutely no proof. Ben did say, "Hey man, I got no wife or sisters to drill, no marriage to mess up. What you gonna do, screw my old lady?" He laughed. I headed back to my table, but I do have to admit that Ben's idea wasn't without merit. My buddies and I left the bar without incident. They did tell me that they would have my back if I ever needed them. The following Saturday night, I went by myself to a bar I'd never been to before. It was a small neighborhood bar with about a dozen customers. Everyone looked at me, seeing they probably knew everyone who ever came into the place. I sat at the end of the bar and ordered a beer. The bartender was Ben's mother. She was probably in her late 40s and was beginning to show her age. She had a few visible tattoos. After setting down my beer, she asked me if I wanted anything else. It was after midnight, but I asked her if it was possible to get anything to eat. "The cook's gone, but I could rustle you up a ham sandwich if you like." I told her that would be great. I hadn't eaten most of the day. She served the other customers and went back and made my sandwich. It had ham, mayo, lettuce, tomato, and cheese. I got a bag of chips to eat with it. Within the hour, most of the customers had left. There were 2 couples still sitting in the booth. Helen was cleaning off the bar and came over to talk to me. "You new here? Where are you from?" "I recently got divorced and moved to West Virginia. I work in the hardware store. I was riding through town and saw this place and decided to get a beer and a bite to eat. Helen, I've been here for 15 years. We don't get many young guys here. They usually want to pick up some young chick, and we don't get many of those," she smiled. "We're just a small-town community bar." "I could use that too," I laughed. "It's been a while since the divorce." I smiled at Helen. She wasn't a bad-looking woman. She wore a low-cut blouse that showed some nice cleavage. She wasn't overweight. In fact, she was on the thinner side. I began kidding with her, and she was flirting back. We talked for a while, and she told me her son moved back in with her and now has his a-hole friend living with him for a few months. She said he was getting a divorce also. "Must be something in the water," she said and smiled. "My ex did a gangbang, and I caught her in the middle of it. I walked out never to return," I replied. "Damn, honey, sorry to hear that." We continued talking. Helen was nice and personable. I decided to go for it. "Helen, what are you doing after work?" "What, are you really interested in an old lady like me?" she asked with a smirk. "I think you're a beautiful woman and I could use some company," I replied confidently. Helen laughed and said, "Well, why not? It's been a while since I had a decent man's company." She closed up the bar and we headed to her place. It was a small house not far from the bar. As we walked in, she said her son Ben wasn't home, so we had the place to ourselves. I knew this might complicate things, but I didn't care. I was here to get even. We had a few more drinks and talked. Helen was charming and easy to be with. One thing led to another, and we ended up in her bedroom. I made sure not to let it get too far, but we had a good time. I wanted Ben to find out, but it had to be in a way that wouldn't backfire on me. In the morning, I thanked Helen for a wonderful night and left. I made sure to leave a note in a place where Ben would find it, saying something like, "Thanks for a great night, Helen. Bob." It was just enough to stir things up without being too direct. The next few weeks, I kept my distance from Ben's place, but I heard through Laura that Ben was furious. He didn't know for sure who Bob was, but he had his suspicions. I also heard that Jack had been trying to get back with Sheila, but she was having none of it. She had filed for divorce and was moving on with her life. Good for her. Megan eventually had her baby. Laura told me it was a boy. Megan tried to get me to acknowledge the child as mine, but I insisted on a DNA test. The test proved what I already knew: the baby wasn't mine. Jack was the father. Megan was devastated, and Jack, being the stand-up guy he was, bailed on her. He couldn't handle the responsibility of a child. Typical. My life was slowly getting back to normal. Laura and I started dating seriously after her graduation. She moved to West Virginia to be closer to me and started working at the local hospital. Our relationship grew stronger, and I found myself falling for her. One evening, after a nice dinner, I asked Laura to marry me. She was surprised, but happily said yes. We got married in a small ceremony with just close friends. Her parents didn't attend, but I didn't care. We were happy, and that was all that mattered. As for Ben and Jack, they eventually got what was coming to them. Ben got into a bar fight and ended up in the hospital. He never knew who did it, but I had my suspicions. Jack's life spiraled downwards. He lost his job and was last seen working odd jobs just to get by. Megan, on the other hand, moved back in with her parents. Her life was a mess, but that was her own doing. Laura and I built a good life together. We had 2 beautiful children and lived happily in our small town. I finally found peace and happiness with the right woman. My past was behind me and I had my revenge. Life was good. Thanks for watching. What do you think about Bob's intense journey from betrayal to revenge and finally finding true happiness with Laura? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more dramatic stories. See you in the next video.